And Las Fallas felt like the perfect metaphor, like the breath of Phoenix that I needed to start this life where I was, leaving my old corporate job behind to venture into this adventure that I had no idea where it was going to lead me.
Welcome to the Crossing It Off podcast, where we believe living with intention through a bucket list lifestyle is a great way to bring yourself personal joy. As you are crossing items off your list, you're actually filling up your bucket. The more items you cross off, the more joy gets added, until eventually your joy spills over into the lives of those around you. Now let's start crossing it off together. Have you ever stacked your bucket list items? Today's bucket list storyteller on the Crossing It Off podcast does a great job of telling us the story of how, after decades of wanting to cross off a specific item, she tacked on a bunch of others to make it more affordable and to have more pleasure out of crossing a lot of items off at one time. Let's listen to her story and start crossing things off. Juliana Moreira. She describes herself as a wanderluster, midlife career breaker, Brazilian American, and citizen of the world. Juliana, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Roger.
Yeah, so tell us, what did you cross off your list?
Visit Valencia in Spain.
Okay, so describe where that is for everyone so they have an understanding of what we're talking about. Where is it located in Spain? So Valencia, where's it located in Spain? What's like the closest city most people would know?
So Valencia is located on the east part of Spain by the Mediterranean Sea. And it's actually the biggest city in its region. But if you think in terms of how it's located from Madrid, it's about a 1 hour and 40-minute ride from Madrid. So in kilometers, that's 365 kilometers. What is that?
Okay.
Maybe 200 miles or so from Madrid. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And so why did you want to go there? What was it about Valencia that drew you to say, I want to put this on my bucket list?
Yeah, so Valencia was really about honoring a childhood dream. There were many layers about this visit that I had to Valencia. So the first one was, so putting in the context, I was born and raised in Brazil. And I had a very comfortable middle-class life, but both my parents, they worked 3 shifts. They didn't have a lot of discretionary income to travel. So when I was a child, like 6, 7 years old, my sister and I, also a kid, we would have this game where we had a table globe that we would spin, and our little fingers would land on a city and say, okay, this is the next city that I'm going to visit. And then we would cut these pictures from my mom's fashion magazines and glue them to a book, which was like my travel album, right, in quotes. and I remember gluing this picture of this beautiful woman wearing a white embroidered dress, where I wrote down, this is my summer afternoon in Valencia. And so I did that with a lot of cities and a lot of countries, but this one about Valencia really stuck in my head for my entire life. And then if you think about the bigger context of what's going on in my life too at the time, it was, we were coming out of the pandemic, and I had just experienced this collective energy that we experience, right, of mortality, this sense of time passing by. And to me, that was really happening also in the context of my own personal and spiritual awakening. And I knew that I had to make some changes in my life. So I decided to take a career break. And when to just spend months traveling at a time, which in itself, it was a bucket list, right? Was to travel without constraints of time in Europe, a country that I wanted just to spend a lot of time. And Valencia was a place that I knew had to be there. So Valencia, in a way, was a bucket list within a bucket list. And once I was in Valencia, I got to experience other bucket lists, other experiences, right, that I've always wanted to do.
That's so amazing to me. Now, I'm curious, do you still have that book that you made as a young child, or is it just something that you remember doing, or does it still exist?
I don't think it exists, but
Okay.
next time I visit my parents, I definitely want to look through the archives
Yeah.
in the old room and see if it's there. But what I can say about that book is that I think that was the very first vision board, right, that I made
Right.
for my life.
That's incredible. We have a very similar story. So you're traveling around the world and you have Valencia on your list. So how did you incorporate Valencia in this? You're stacking all these bucket list items together, and how did that piece come together for you?
So yeah, so I started my career break in Portugal. So I was traveling in Portugal for 2 weeks, and I wanted to start there. And I said, I want to give it a little bit of time to get acclimated in Europe before I venture out in this city that seemed so mythical to me, right? Going to
Hmm.
Valencia. So Valencia, I was there in my second week of having spent 2 weeks on the road in Portugal, visiting many places. And so when I landed in Valencia, I really didn't have a very set itinerary. I knew that I wanted to experience the city. And there was this one particular thing that I knew I wanted to do, which was I needed to go to the beach to see the Mediterranean Sea from there.
Mm.
And I had been in the Mediterranean Ocean before. I've swum in the Mediterranean Ocean before in other countries. But for me, there was just this significance of honoring that childhood dream that I would be at the beach, right? At the
Hmm.
time, I said I wanted to be with that white embroidered summer dress. But guess what? This was March. It was so cold. It was very cold and it was raining. And not only that, but I was also there in the context of this huge, massive festival called Las Fallas that happens every year to celebrate the spring equinox. So
Hmm.
there were 2 million people out in the
Oh
streets,
my
and
goodness.
this city was loud and it was noisy, and there are fireworks just po 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 bombing, cracking all day long, all night long, and I could hardly sleep that entire week due to this festival. So when I arrived in Valencia, I remember that one of the things that I wanted to do was I want to visit all these different places, this beautiful medieval city with all of these historical landmarks. But I was exhausted, right? I was exhausted and I was in awe and I was in misery. And it was like all of these different feelings happening to me at the same time because there I was, honoring my dream of being in Europe. But I was tired. I had spent 2 weeks visiting a bunch of churches and museums and historical landmarks. So when I arrived in Valencia, I wanted to experience the festival of Las Fallas, and I also wanted to have a break from doing the traditional historical tour.
Right.
And the thing that was really big about Valencia too is that it really spoke to this, like I mentioned earlier, the spiritual awakening and transformation that was happening inside of me that was about let me trust my gut and my instincts as opposed to just focusing so much on my rational mind.
Mm.
My rational mind really wanted to visit the church where supposedly the Holy Grail was there, right? And it was just not that far from the hotel that I was staying. But my body, my gut, my instinct, they were telling me this. You need to rest.
Mm.
You're tired. You need to try to get some sleep. The second part was just go wander around without a set itinerary. My body was really telling me that. And so Valencia for me really in Valencia, I created this space to let go of this FOMO, right? Of this
Mm.
fear of missing out,
Yeah, for sure.
seeing all of these cool things that my rational mind said I needed to see to focus on how I wanted to do at the moment.
So let me ask, did you know that this festival was going to be going on? Was that a part of picking the time to go to Valencia, or was that just something you like rolled into town and was like, oh my gosh, this thing's happening?
No, I knew this was going to happen, and I specifically selected to be in Valencia during the time. But here's a little bit more context. I had never heard of Las Fallas until the year before I went there. I was there
Mm.
in February 2022. I'm sorry, March 2022. And I had the first time I ever heard of Las Fallas was in 2021. I heard it when I was planning to go on my career break. And at the time, I had a career break coach who said, "Oh, if you're going to Valencia, check out this festival because in the end, they burn all of these huge sculptures that they built for the festival. They burn it all out." So that thing about burning it all out really spoke loudly to me.
Hmm.
And when I did my research about it, and I found out that that is the climax of the party, that they really burned massive sculptures, which are called Las Fallas, that spoke to this phase that I was going through my life, which was to burn the old to create space for the new. So Valencia came to me with that symbolism, right?
Hmm.
And Las Fallas felt like perfect the perfect metaphor, like the breath of Phoenix that I needed to start this life where I was, leaving my old corporate job behind to venture into this adventure that I had no idea where it was going to lead me.
During your time there, the festival's going on, nonstop. Sounds like you get to the end and you're there when they're burning these sculptures. How was that emotionally for you? What was that like as far as a culmination to your time there?
It was unbelievable, Roger. It was, and when I think about it, I remember being there in the middle of that festival and just feeling of how fortunate, how lucky I was, even though I was not getting much sleep. I really was going through these beautiful medieval streets feeling like a zombie in a way. But I remember when Saturday night, the last night of the festival came in, and I chose to watch the burning of the fire. There are many fires, like there are over 400 of these fires all around the
Wow.
city. And I said, you know what, I'm going to choose this one here. It was a Salvador Dali themed fire. Lots of sculptures that were resembling the paintings of Salvador Dali. And I chose to watch that one burn. And I stayed around it because think about it, there's millions of people in the street and everybody wants to see these things burn. And I stayed there at night. It was like almost midnight. It was raining. It was so cold. I mean, I had gloves and hats and boots and an umbrella. And I had these thousands of people around me. And I'm looking at this sculpture of Dali, and everything about it just seems exactly like that, surreal, like the surrealism that it portrays, right?
Right.
Um, so I remember at one point there was the sculpture, there was a Jesus in a sculpture, right? And at one point when the firefighters came in to start prepping the space for the sculpture to burn, they accidentally dropped the arm of Jesus in the ground. And the crowd was like, "Oh no." But I remember these Italian kids picking up the arm of Jesus and starting to scratch their backs and taking, a bunch of selfies, and people are laughing, and it's all bizarre and it's funny and bizarre at the same time. And I'm just watching all of this in awe. And then all of a sudden, the firefighter throws this eye from one of the sculptures into the crowd. And guess what? The eye lands on my hands. This big eye, right? Made out of styrofoam. and I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel so lucky. How is it that they're giving me a piece of this thing? And then within moments, I also realized that like, no. This eye needs to burn. This is all about creating space for the new. It was meant to burn. So I run up to the front of this activity, and I tell the firefighter, hey, can you please make sure that you burn this? I can't keep this. So he throws it back, and then this beautiful Spanish woman dressed in an 18th century costume, she lights the fire that burns everything down. And I see that eye burning, and the entire sculpture's burning, and everybody around me, that collective energy of, wow, what is going on? These sculptures that so beautifully made, that cost some of them hundreds of thousands of euros, burning high, and all of a sudden everything just turns into ashes, right? And I just remember feeling so lucky for seeing all of this. And something really powerful happened not just that night I went to bed, there was still a lot of fireworks, but they had diminished because it was the end of the festival. So I had the best night's sleep I've had in like an entire week.
Here at the Crossing It Off podcast, we are passionate about inspiring you in your bucket list lifestyle and empowering you to live out your list. We offer many resources to assist you in your bucket list journey, such as web resources in the show notes, bucket list mentoring services, my book Live Out Your Lists, a private Facebook group for you to share your bucket list success stories with others, and more. All of these can be found at crossingitoffpodcast.com. Find the resource that fits your need so that you can live out your list. Now back to the show.
But then the next day, when I got on the, like 2 days later, I got on this on this train to go to my next destination in Spain. And I was on the train looking through the window and seeing the beautiful countryside of Spain. I remember at that moment feeling this shift inside of me. And I couldn't at the time really put it in words, but I just felt as if there was this energy shift inside of me. Like I realize now that was the moment that I started feeling like I was reconnecting with myself, with somebody who, like, I'm reconnected with my own energy, with my feminine power that allows miracles to come to my life and to happen in my life, right? So it was that significance for me, I think, that Las Fallas and the burning of the fires had in my life.
So you're having this epiphany or this change, transformation happening. How did that show up in the rest of your journey, right? So you were, taking a career break, traveling around the world. This is like your second or third place that you stopped. How did that transformation affect the rest of your trip?
Yeah. It really affected to the point that I said from that on, like I mentioned earlier, that I will trust that I'm going to do the things that my body are telling me to do. I am not going to be listening so much to my rational mind that tells me, oh, you have to visit this or that place. No, today I actually just want to have a glass of wine and sit by this beautiful, beautiful beach and see the sunset, right? Or today, I do want to be in this church in silence, just meditating and praying. So it really was about starting to tune in to what my body wanted to be at the moment. And I think also in that space, what it created, it was all of these little miracles, people coming out to make my experiences even greater than what they were. For example, later, and it was like little things, like, for example, I remember later on in my journey, I ended up going to Bosnia and Herzegovina, and I became very good friends with my tour guide. And I said, look, I'm going to spend a few days in this little town. And he said, well, nobody stays here overnight. Since you're going to be here for a few days, I have a friend in this town, so let's go meet him. So while you're here, you can come and hang out with them if they want. So he introduces me to these guys who worked by this beautiful 14th century mosque in the town of Mostar in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And all of the days that I was there, they were like, just come here at 5:00 and we'll have coffee together. And those are the things that I remember about this. It was like being so open to create these little miracles, right? That they were not in my set itinerary. Every day in the 3 days that I stayed in this little town, I had coffee with those guys. And it's like one of the most most beautiful memories that I have of this time being there. And just like that, there were so many other experiences that were about that, about connecting with people, about people giving me even more than what I had originally requested or thought or dreamed of having.
I think that's a great way to travel and have I call it slow travel. In America, it's so expensive for us to travel to Europe, just flight wise, that a lot of times, people think, oh, we got to do this, got to do that, to make it worth it. And for me, it's the slow travel like you're describing that allows it to be worth it. If you spend every day rushing to get in this line to see this and get into that line to see that, it's, that's no fun for me. So I get what you're saying. If we can go back to Valencia just a little bit, if somebody said, oh, I want to go there, what was something that you would say? It could be the festival, it could be something else, but what would you tell them? Oh, well, you have to do this. What do they need to make sure they put on their list?
Well, it is funny. It's a good question because Valencia for me, in a way, it was different than like saying, look, these are the places that you need to go to. Why? Valencia was about all these different experiences for me, right? So I would
Hmm.
say to somebody, definitely consider going during Las Fallas. Just know that it's going to be a massive chaos, but you can get a lot out of it, right? But
Yep.
the other thing that I did in Valencia that I honestly didn't know I was going to do in Valencia was attend a bullfight.
Mm.
Um, that was a bucket list in itself for me. And I know that it's not for everyone. And I'm going to tell you this, I wouldn't do it again, but I
Mm.
had to do it,
Yeah.
right? I've always wanted to do this. Also, it was one of those childhood dreams. Since I was a kid, I wanted to do this because of just being exposed to it through videos, through people saying that, like, you need to see this. And then when I was in college, I read some Ernest Hemingway stories of him, of him like experiencing bullfights in
Yeah.
Spain, and I always wanted to see this. So I was in Seville 14 years ago, and I actually went to a bullfight. But when I sat down in the arena, in the bullfight ring, but it started to rain really, really hard, and the bullfight had to be canceled. So I never got to experience that in Seville, which was one of like the most popular places in Spain for a bullfight. So
Sure.
when I arrived in Valencia, and I got off the subway station, I got off exactly in the place where they have the Plaza de Bulls, which is the bullfight stadium, right? The big arena that looks like the Roman Colosseum in a smaller scale. And I just knew it that I had to experience that. I saw the signs outside saying bullfight today. So I remember putting everything out, dropping off my luggage at my Airbnb, and I came back to watch the bullfight the day that I arrived there. I remember just being so excited walking into this bullfight because it was a bucket list within my bucket list, right?
Hmm.
And I bought this little cushion so I could sit and experience the event. And this guy, was selling food and drinks, and I bought these roasted almonds that really they were the best I've ever had in my entire life. So I was very excited reading my almonds, and then all of a sudden the Spanish horns start playing, and people are so excited. It's about 70% capacity, and it's a family event. There is old people, new people, like all these Spanish families, and there were some tourists as well. But I was there by myself, watching all of this, and then the bullfight starts. And honestly, I didn't know what to expect other than I know that a bull is going to die, but I don't know exactly how this is going to play out.
Hmm.
And as I am going through all of this, so here comes the matadors, right? There was the matadors and their that elegance and that masculinity that looks so sexy too, right? And the outfits and they're good looking and strong. And then the bull comes in, and then that dance of death, right, starts.
Mm.
And I'm watching this in awe, but all of a sudden something shifted. As soon as I noticed that the bull already came in hurt, like he's already hurt, but it's there. I'm like, that's not very fair for the bull. The matador opens his red cape, and the bull kneels down, kind of answering to the matador's commands. And then the matador takes his swords and just pierce the bull like this beautiful animal, right in between the shoulder blades. And the bull just collapses on the floor, and
Hmm.
there is all this blood still on the floor. And then there's blood on the matador's outfit, and the bull is now dead, and people just drag his lifeless body across this arena. This gorgeous animal that just moments ago was so beautiful and alive there. And I am at that time that all that I had from the beginning was completely gone. Like
Hmm.
I could hardly move. And I looked behind me. There were these tourists behind me. They were European guys. And I could tell that they were experiencing the same. And we kind of just looked at each other and like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
This is savage, right? So I said, okay, I'm gonna stay for one more to see what happens. And then there were supposed to be 6 bulls killed
Oh, wow.
in a bullfight. And I could only stay for 2. And I said, goodbye. I cannot stay here anymore. I got enough. I crossed it off my bucket list. It's time to move on.
Yeah, sometimes we have to put things on our list and experience them to know we don't want to do them again. So that's yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
I was
No,
going to say there was one thing that I was going to say that people should do when they're in Valencia. It is to experience paella, and especially if you're experiencing a paella cooking class.
oh yes,
Uh,
nice.
Absolutely. So, for people who don't know, paella is this traditional dish made out of rice, and so Valencia is one of the largest ports in the Mediterranean Sea, and it's been a big rice producer for over 1,000 years, and so it is the traditional dish, and it's very used in festive occasions. And it's a very social food, normally eaten
Hmm.
on holidays and weekends. So, and it's cooked in this gigantic pan that it's big, like the size of a car tire, right?
Yep.
And I wanted to experience Valencia, the traditional paella. So I signed up for a cooking class. I found it online, and it was this experience called My First Paella, and I highly recommend it. And so it started off with us going to the market, the Mercado de Rusafa, to buy the fresh ingredients. So it was this beautiful market with all these seafood stands, and these stands full of jamon, right, which is the Spanish ham,
Hmm.
and all these vegetables. So we chose all of this, and then we went to the industrial kitchen where we would be cooking the paellas. And it was a group of about maybe 15 people. And we were split in 2 groups. Those that would cook the traditional paella, which does not have seafood in it. The traditional
Hmm.
paella has snails and has rabbits, and whatever vegetable is available in the season. And then there was the seafood paella group. So that was another example where I decided to, my rational mind wanted me to go for the traditional paella, but my body really wanted to experience the seafood paella. So I went for
Hmm.
seafood, right? I allowed myself to just experience what my body wanted. So we started off by having sangria, right? They made fresh sangria, and we were drinking sangria, and we're having all this delicious appetizer, manchego cheese, um, and jamon. And then everybody helped, slicing off the tomatoes or picking up the saffron, which to me was so beautiful, just for me to touch the saffron. Like, this is Spanish saffron. And I put it in this big, beautiful pot, and it smells so good. And everybody's a little bit of a buzz from this sangria, and everybody is happy and excited. And then when the food was ready, we all sat in this huge table and shared that meal together. And it was delicious. It was
Yeah.
one of the most delicious meals I've ever had. Not just the food itself was delicious, but sharing it with other people, right? In that
Yeah.
energy of creation and of love. So that was a beautiful thing that I recommend for people
That's
to do there.
awesome. Building community in the process of feeding one another is pretty cool. Juliana, what's something else that you want to cross off your bucket list?
I would love to learn how to sail.
Mm.
And it was also a desire that showed up for me during this career break, because I ended up doing a lot of boat trips, including some small sailing trips, short sailing trips when I was in Europe. And in fact, 2023 started, and just 3 days ago, I signed up for my very first sailing class.
Nice. Excellent. And it's on my partner's list as well. Juliana, thank you so much for being here. How can people find more information about you or follow you on the internet?
Yes, so I launched a blog called globaljuliana.com, and I wanted to tell people the experiences about my career break. So I launched it just 3 months ago. And you can also find me on Instagram. It's at Global Juliana. That's my handle. Just going back to my blog, I actually have a blog post about the Las Fallas, and you can visit it at globaljuliana.com / Fallas 2022.
Awesome. We will put all those things in the show notes for people to be able to find them directly and click on those links. Juliana, thank you so much for sharing your story. And I can't wait to hear about your sailing adventures.
Thank you so much, Roger. It's been a pleasure.